Hi there, Kareen Erbe here with Broken Ground, and today I want to talk to you about my top 3 methods for preserving tomatoes. So we've moved from the outside garden into the kitchen here, and remember in permaculture, we're trying to always extend our yield in time. We want to obtain a yield as one of the permaculture principles, but we want to extend that yield in time in terms of being able to, especially in a cold climate, still be able to eat from our garden well into the winter. So preservation techniques and learning preservation techniques is really important to put up our harvest. So I want to go over my top 3 ways, and the reason that I like these 3 methods is because they minimize the amount of mess that you make in your kitchen, which is always good, and they're also quick, simple, and easy to do. So my first method is oven roasting the tomatoes and then freezing them. And so what I do is I take a glass baking dish and I take any kind of tomatoes that need to be preserved, that are, on the point of going bad. I often use more of the juicy tomatoes, juicy tomatoes, rather than the fleshy kind. And I'm just cutting them in half, basically. So you cut them in half, and then you put them with the cut sides down into the baking dish. So just going through and, cutting off areas of the tomato that don't look so awesome, and then just cutting them and putting them face down. So that's really quick. I try to do, I have 3 of these glass baking dishes, so I usually do 3 at once to maximize the energy use from the oven. And you put them all down in here, and then you want to add a couple other things. So you can add some garlic. So I'm typically crushing just a little bit of garlic. You can either slice it up if you like that, but I find, again, crushing it is simpler and quicker. So I crush about a clove or 2 per pan. And again, I like this method because it's very forgiving, right? You don't have to be too exact about how much how much garlic or how much basil or how much spice you put into this. So you're doing the garlic, you're putting the tomatoes down, you're putting the garlic in there, and then I usually put basil in there as well. And this basil plant is basically done. It's at the end of its life. And so I brought it in from the greenhouse, and it's been indoors for a while, and I've been still enjoying fresh basil, but I think it's almost done. And so I just take a few leaves, again, cut them up a little bit, throw them down, usually kind of on the bottom of the pan, or you may want to put the tomatoes on top of the basil. You just don't want that basil to burn at all. And then you put about a tablespoon of olive oil into the pan and throw it in the oven at 325 degrees Fahrenheit. So usually you start with a couple hours, see if that reduces them down enough, and if all of or most of the juices have evaporated. You want the juice to have evaporated and for them to be kind of wrinkly. And so once that's done, whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours, take them out of the oven, I cool it down, and then I'll put them in reused yogurt containers or reused plastic bags, and I will put them in the freezer. And the reason I love this method is that, oven roasting the tomatoes concentrates the sugars, so they're super delicious, and it's really easy. And then, in January, when I want a fresh garden meal, I'll cook some pasta for 10 minutes. I'll defrost these oven roasted tomatoes, throw them on there, and you have a really simple meal. So not only simple in its preservation, but then simple to prepare and eat down the road. So that is my preferred method, and it helps too because you're hopefully using maybe the garlic that you've harvested It's a great way to also use a large quantity of basil too. And then adding, you know, just a little bit of salt and pepper into there as well is great. Now I've also added thyme or oregano or rosemary. Basically, you know, whatever herbs you have out there that you might want to use up, or depending on your taste. So again, that's my first method. So my second method is to dehydrate your tomatoes. So I usually suggest that you use the more fleshy tomatoes in this case. So you're using your Roma tomatoes, your paste tomatoes for this, for dehydrating. Because if you use the slicing tomatoes, again, they have a lot of liquid in them, so it will take them that much more time to dehydrate. So you use the fleshy tomatoes, these Roma tomatoes, and you cut them into kind of 1/4 inch slices. So 1/4 inch slices, and then you're just placing them on the dehydrating pan. Then you're placing them fairly close together on this tray, but with enough room obviously for the airflow to come through. So this dehydrator is not, I wouldn't say that it's super efficient. I got it at the thrift store. Kind of sounds like a hair dryer, but it actually does work. You know, they do recommend, if you're a crazy dehydrator and you have the budget, the Excalibur Dehydrator that's out there is what is recommended, just in terms of its efficiency and the ability to control the temperature and the time. But this method, you have to, you know, put everything in there. I put the kitchen timer on to remind me to check it after 3 hours to see how things are going. And typically with tomatoes, it could take anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. So again, with dehydrating, it just all depends on how much initial liquid is in whatever you're choosing to dehydrate. But this is a really good method. Once they're dry, I take them out, I put them in mason jars, in glass containers, and I keep them that way, and usually then just enjoy them as a dehydrated snack. I will sometimes add them to sauces, so kind of reconstitute them. And then the other option is, I've also done this as well, is you add olive oil to them. So they're kind of like sun-dried tomatoes, but they're dehydrated. I'd love to move towards a solar dehydrator down the road, and it's on the list. So that will also cut down on the energy use that it takes to actually preserve your food. So again, that's my second method, dehydrating tomatoes. And then my third and last and simplest method is to actually just freeze tomatoes whole. So you know, when I'm scrambling and there's a lot to do, but I see that some tomatoes are going bad, I will just take, again, a reused plastic bag, and I'll just throw a bunch of them in there, and then they just freeze like that. If you have a vacuum sealer, that's great. That means they'll last longer, and they'll be fresher. But I found that it works just fine. Like, for example, I got a old quinoa bag here. I filled it full of tomatoes, and then I just throw that into the freezer. And then in January or something, I'll take some of those out. I can choose how many I want to take out, and I'll make a sauce out of them. So if you don't like tomato skins as part of the texture of your sauce, obviously this method is not the best method, because there is no good and efficient way in which to take the skins off of frozen tomatoes. But I actually don't mind the texture, and in fact, like apples or pears or any fruit, most of the nutrient, or a lot of the nutrient, is in the skin, so I prefer to keep that skin on there. So again, this is a really simple method, and you can, while it's in the bag, you know, you can measure out how many you want to have come out of there. So that's also a great method, and super simple. you don't have to mess up your kitchen at all in that case. So I really like that. So those are my top 3 methods. So while I can eat tomatoes fresh, I do for as long as possible. So right now in our basement, I still have tomato plants where the tomatoes are ripening on the plants in the basement. So we will eat fresh tomatoes into December, but beyond December, then I have all these 3 preservation methods where then I can continue to eat tomatoes from the garden well into March. So let me know what methods you use for preserving tomatoes. I'd love it if you shared those in the comments below. And I hope you have your garden put to bed for the season and you've retreated indoors and are enjoying the harvest from your garden this season. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.